Marcus running, Bear never thought he'd be raising twin infants alone. The Comanche reservation stretched endlessly under the Oklahoma sky, and somewhere in that vastness lay his wife Dancing Moon, taken by complications during childbirth just 3 weeks ago. The twins, little Joseph and Maria, named to honor both their Comanche heritage and their mother's Mexican roots, cried constantly. Their tiny fists waved in the air as they searched for nourishment he couldn't provide. The tribal clinic had given him formula and bottles, but the Bobbies rejected everything. They were losing weight, and Dr. Patricia Hawkins at the Indian Health Service facility had grown increasingly concerned. "Marcus, these Bobbies need breast milk," she'd told him during their last visit. "Formula isn't working for them. You need to find a wet nurse, and soon." That's how he met Rebecca Martinez. She was 22, recently divorced, with a 6-month-old daughter named Isabella. Rebecca had responded to the notice he'd posted at the community center in town, just off the reservation. She was Latina, struggling to make ends meet after her husband left her for his secretary. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. A Comanche man and a Mexican-American woman, both abandoned by their partners, coming together to save his children. Rebecca lived in a small apartment complex on the east side of Lawton, about 30 minutes from Marcus's home on the reservation. The first time she came to his house, she was nervous, clutching Isabella close to her chest. Marcus's house was modest but clean, a 2-bedroom tribal housing unit with faded blue siding and a small front porch where his grandmother used to sit and weave baskets. "The pay isn't much," Marcus had warned her, "but I can give you $300 a week, and I'll cover gas money for you to come here twice a day." Rebecca had nodded quickly. $300 a week was more than she made at her part-time job at the grocery store, and she could bring Isabella with her. "I understand what it's like to lose someone," she'd said quietly, watching as Marcus struggled to comfort the crying twins. "My mother died when I was 16. Family isn't just blood, sometimes it's who shows up when you need them most." The arrangement worked beautifully. Rebecca would arrive at 7 each morning, nurse both Bobbies, then return at noon and again at 6 in the evening. Isabella would play on a blanket while Rebecca fed the twins, and gradually, the two women, Rebecca and Marcus's elderly Aunt Rose, who helped during the day, formed an unlikely friendship. Rose had been skeptical at first. "Why not find a Comanche woman?" she'd asked Marcus in their native language. But as days turned into weeks, she saw how the Bobbies thrived under Rebecca's care. Joseph and Maria began gaining weight, their cries became less desperate, and they started sleeping through the night. Marcus watched Rebecca with growing respect, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. She was gentle but efficient, singing soft Spanish lullabies to the twins while they nursed. She never complained about the long drives to the reservation or the modest payment. Most importantly, She treated his children as if they were her own. The trouble started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in late September. Rebecca arrived for the morning feeding, but she was shaking, her face pale with worry. Isabella clung to her mother's neck, sensing the tension. "My ex-husband's parents," Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been calling me, saying I'm an unfit mother. They think I'm exposing Isabella to people who might be dangerous." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He knew exactly what they meant, and it had nothing to do with his character and everything to do with his race. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth, that I'm working as a wet nurse for a family who needs help, but they said terrible things about you, about this place. They called you a savage." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never thought they'd react like this." Rose, who had been listening from the kitchen, emerged with a cup of coffee for Rebecca. "Child, some people's ignorance runs deeper than a river. You can't let their poison touch what's good here." But the harassment escalated quickly. Rebecca's ex-in-laws, Thomas and Linda Rodriguez, had never approved of their son's marriage to Rebecca. They blamed her for the divorce, convinced that she had somehow corrupted their precious Eduardo. Now, learning that she was working for a Native American family, they saw an opportunity to challenge her fitness as a mother. The calls became daily occurrences. Thomas Rodriguez, a successful businessman in Lawton with connections throughout the county, began making inquiries about Marcus. He contacted the Department of Human Services, claiming that Rebecca was exposing Isabella to an unsafe environment and questionable people. He hired a private investigator to follow Rebecca to the reservation and document her visits. Rebecca tried to hide her growing anxiety from Marcus, but he could see the toll it was taking. She jumped at every phone call, checked her locks obsessively, and had started bringing a small suitcase with essentials whenever she came to feed the twins, as if she might need to flee at any moment. "You don't have to do this," Marcus told her one evening after she'd finished the 6 o'clock feeding. The twins were finally content, sleeping peacefully in their cribs. "I won't let anyone hurt you or Isabella because you're helping my family." Rebecca looked up from burping Maria, her dark eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. "These bobbies need me, Marcus. Your bobbies. I'm not going to abandon them because some bitter people can't stand seeing me move on with my life." That night after Rebecca left, Marcus called his cousin David, who worked as a paralegal in Oklahoma City. "I need to know what we're dealing with," Marcus explained. "If these people are serious about trying to take Isabella, Rebecca needs to be prepared." David's response was sobering. "Grandparents' rights cases are complicated, but if they can prove she's putting Isabella in danger, or even just an unstable situation, they might have a case. The fact that she's working on the reservation. Marcus, you know how some judges feel about us. Marcus stared out his window at the endless prairie, where his ancestors had once hunted buffalo and lived free. Now he was fighting a different kind of battle, one waged in courtrooms and government offices, where his heritage could be used against an innocent woman trying to help his children survive. The next morning, Rebecca didn't show up for the 7 o'clock feeding. Marcus waited until 8, then called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. He tried her apartment, but there was no answer. By 9, the twins were screaming with hunger, and Marcus was packing his kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear as he left message after message. It was Rose who suggested calling the police. "Something's wrong," the elderly woman said, bouncing a crying Joseph in her arms. "That girl wouldn't just disappear. She loves these bobbies too much." The Lawton Police Department was less than helpful. "Sir, adults have the right to change their minds about employment," the desk sergeant told Marcus. "Unless you have evidence of foul play, there's nothing we can do. She's probably just decided to quit." But Marcus knew better. Rebecca wouldn't have left without saying goodbye to the twins, without making sure they'd be okay. Something had happened, and he had a sinking feeling that Thomas and Linda Rodriguez were behind it. As the day wore on and Rebecca remained missing, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He strapped the twins into their car seats, asked Rose to come with him, and drove to Rebecca's apartment complex. The manager, a friendly woman named Mrs. Johnson, confirmed Marcus's worst fears. "Oh, those poor things," she said, looking at the bobbies. "Rebecca's in-laws came by yesterday evening with some official-looking papers. There was a lot of shouting, crying. They took Isabella and said Rebecca could get her back when she started making better choices about her life." Marcus felt a rage building in his chest that he hadn't experienced since his army days in Afghanistan. These people had stolen a mother's child to punish her for helping his family. They'd used the system, their connections, and their prejudice to destroy an innocent woman's life. "Where did they take her?" he asked. Mrs. Johnson shook her head. "I don't know, honey, but Rebecca was beside herself. She kept saying she had to call you, had to make sure the bobbies would be okay. Even in her own crisis, she was worried about your little ones." Driving back to the reservation with hungry, crying twins and a plan forming in his mind, Marcus Running Bear prepared for war. Thomas and Linda Rodriguez had made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated what a Comanche warrior would do to protect his family. And Rebecca Martinez had earned her place in that family the moment she'd opened her heart to his children. The battle for Isabella had begun, but Marcus knew something the Rodriguez family didn't. He had connections too, allies they'd never see coming, and a determination forged in the fires of loss and love that no court order or social pressure could extinguish. Marcus spent the rest of that first day without Rebecca trying to keep his twins alive while formulating a plan. Rose had managed to get some formula into Joseph, but Maria rejected everything they offered. Her cries grew weaker as the hours passed, a sound that tore at Marcus's heart more than any enemy fire he'd faced in combat. By evening, desperation drove him to make a call he'd been avoiding. His ex-girlfriend, Jennifer White Hawk, was a social worker with the tribe and had experience navigating the complex web of family services. They dated briefly 2 years ago, and things had ended awkwardly when Marcus couldn't commit. But Jennifer had always been fair, and right now, he needed someone who understood both the legal system and the unique challenges facing Native families. Marcus, Jennifer's voice was surprised when she answered, "It's been a while. I need help, Jen. Not for me, for someone who's been helping my family." He explained the situation quickly, hearing Jennifer's sharp intake of breath when he described Isabella's kidnapping. Those bastards used emergency protective custody. Jennifer's professional composure cracked. "Marcus, that's supposed to be for immediate danger situations. If they convinced a judge that Rebecca was endangering Isabella by working for you, they played the racism card," Marcus said bluntly. "Made it sound like she was exposing Isabella to dangerous savages on the reservation." There was silence on the line before Jennifer spoke again, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I'll make some calls tonight. There are procedures they have to follow, even with emergency custody. And Marcus, get Maria to the clinic. If she won't take formula, she needs medical intervention." Dr. Patricia Hawkins took one look at Maria and immediately arranged for IV fluids. "She's building a public narrative," Marcus realized, "making herself look like the victim while positioning for another custody fight." "But here's the really scary part," Rebecca continued. "She asked me about you specifically. Wanted to know if you were still struggling to take care of the twins, if you seemed stable, if there were any signs that the Bobbies weren't being properly cared for. She was fishing for ammunition." Marcus felt the pieces of Rodriguez's strategy coming together. Attack on multiple fronts, position himself as a concerned grandfather, denied access to Isabella, while simultaneously building a case that Marcus was an unfit father. If he could get both children into the system, he could potentially gain influence over all three Bobbies, Isabella through grandparents' rights, and the twins through positioning himself as a community advocate for child welfare. "There's more," Rebecca said quietly. "Linda mentioned that they've been in contact with someone from Child Protective Services. She said it like it was casual, like she was just networking with people who shared her concerns about child welfare. But Marcus, I think they're planning to file reports about you." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked through his house, looking at it through the eyes of a hostile investigator. The home was clean and well-maintained, but it was also clearly modest, a tribal housing with government-issued furniture and hand-me-down baby equipment. To someone looking for problems, it could be painted as inadequate for raising children. The twins' room was small, with their cribs placed close together and limited space for playing. The kitchen had basic appliances but nothing fancy. The living room furniture was worn but comfortable. Everything was functional and clean, but it wasn't the kind of setup that screamed stable middle-class home to people who equated wealth with fitness for parenting. Tyler arrived the next morning with a van full of surveillance equipment. "We're going full defensive mode," he announced, unloading cameras, motion sensors, and recording devices. "If Rodriguez wants to play games, we're going to document every move." As they installed cameras around the property, Tyler explained his broader investigation. "I've been digging deeper into the family's first organization that Linda Rodriguez volunteers with. It's nastier than we originally thought. They're not just anti-Native. They're part of a network that specifically targets minority families for child welfare complaints." "What do you mean?" "They have a whole playbook. Find families that fit certain profiles: single parents, ethnic minorities, low-income households, and manufacture complaints to Child Protective Services. They claim they're protecting children, but what they're really doing is using the system to harass families they don't approve of." Tyler showed Marcus printed emails between Linda Rodriguez and other families' first members. The communications revealed a coordinated effort to target Marcus, with specific strategies for making complaints that would be taken seriously by authorities. One email from Linda was particularly chilling. "The key is to avoid obvious racial language while still communicating the real concerns. Instead of saying dangerous Indians, we talk about isolated reservation communities with limited resources. Instead of savage culture, we mention concerning traditional practices that may not align with modern child safety standards. The caseworkers know what we mean, but it gives them cover to act on our concerns." Marcus felt sick reading the calculated prejudice disguised as child advocacy. These people had turned bigotry into a bureaucratic weapon, using the very systems designed to protect children to persecute families they considered undesirable. "Here's the thing, though," Tyler continued. "They've been sloppy about electronic communications. These emails, the private investigators' reports, the coordination between different families' first chapters, it's all documented. If they do file false reports against you, we can prove it's part of a conspiracy to harass your family." But knowing about the threat and stopping it were different things. Child Protective Services was required to investigate all reports, even obviously false ones. A single anonymous call claiming that the twins were being neglected or abused would trigger an investigation that could traumatize the children and disrupt their care routine. The call came 3 days later. Marcus was feeding Joseph his morning bottle when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Oklahoma DHS. Mr. Running Bear, this is Sarah Chen from the Department of Human Services. We've received some concerns about the welfare of your children, and I need to schedule a home visit to follow up. Marcus's hands went cold, but his voice remained steady. What kind of concerns? I can't discuss the specifics over the phone, but we've had reports about inadequate childcare arrangements and potential safety issues in your home. This is just a standard follow-up. Nothing to worry about if everything is appropriate. They scheduled the visit for Friday afternoon, giving Marcus 3 days to prepare. Jennifer White Hawk immediately filed for an emergency consultation with Judge Morrison, arguing that the DHS investigation was part of a harassment campaign by the Rodriguez family. Meanwhile, Tyler activated his network of contacts within various government agencies. What he found was disturbing but not surprising. The complaint had been filed by someone identifying himself as concerned community member, who claimed to have witnessed neglect during visits to Marcus's home. The caller provided specific details about the twins' care routine, the layout of Marcus's house, and Angela spotted Horse's schedule, information that could only have come from surveillance. It's definitely Rodriguez or someone working for him, Tyler reported. The complaint mentions things that only someone watching your house would know. But here's the good news. The caller made some factual errors that we can disprove. He claimed Angela only comes once a day, that the twins are often left alone for hours, and that you've been seen drinking alcohol while caring for them. Marcus almost laughed at the last accusation. He'd been sober since returning from Afghanistan, a decision he'd made after seeing what alcohol did to too many veterans. His sobriety was well documented through VA counseling records and tribal community involvement. But the false accusations also revealed something important about Rodriguez's strategy. He wasn't just trying to remove the twins from Marcus's care. He was building a narrative that would justify his own intervention. If Marcus was portrayed as an alcoholic who neglected his children, Rodriguez could position himself as the concerned citizen who tried to help before authorities finally acted. The DHS visit went better than Marcus had expected. Sarah Chen was a professional who'd worked with tribal families before and understood the cultural context of reservation life. She spent 2 hours observing Marcus with the twins, interviewing Angela Spotted Horse, and reviewing medical records that showed the Bobbies were thriving. Mr. Running Bear, she said as she prepared to leave. "I have to ask, do you have any idea who might have filed this complaint? Because frankly, what I've observed today doesn't match the allegations at all." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Ms. Chen, 3 months ago, someone tried to take custody of the woman who was nursing my children. They made false accusations about me to support their case. When that failed, they hired a private investigator to watch my house. I believe this complaint is part of an ongoing harassment campaign." Chen's expression sharpened. "Do you have documentation of this harassment?" "Extensive documentation. Photos, emails, recorded phone calls, and surveillance footage of people watching my home. I'd like to see that documentation. If someone is filing false reports to weaponize our system, that's a serious crime." That afternoon, Jennifer White Hawk, Tyler Redhorse, and Marcus sat in Chen's office with boxes of evidence. They laid out the entire timeline: Rodriguez's original custody grab, the extortion attempt, the private investigator surveillance, the family's first conspiracy, and now the false DHS complaint. Chen listened with growing anger. "Mr. Running Bear, I owe you an apology. It's clear that our system was manipulated by people with malicious intent. I'm going to recommend that this case be closed with no findings of abuse or neglect, and I'm also going to refer this information to the Attorney General's office for investigation of filing false reports." But Marcus knew the victory was temporary. Rodriguez had failed with the direct approach, but men like him always had backup plans. The real question was what he'd try next, and whether Marcus would see it coming in time to protect his family. As they left the DHS office, Tyler pulled Marcus aside. "Brother, I think it's time we stopped playing defense and went on the offensive. Rodriguez has declared war on your family. Maybe it's time to finish what he started." Marcus looked at his friend, thinking about the twins sleeping peacefully at home, about Rebecca rebuilding her life in the shadow of her former in-law's hatred, about all the other families who might face similar attacks if Rodriguez wasn't stopped. "What did you have in mind?" Tyler smiled grimly. "I'm thinking it's time the community learned exactly who Thomas Rodriguez really is. And I'm thinking the federal government might be very interested in his business practices and his conspiracy to weaponize child protective services against minority families." The war was far from over, but Marcus Running Bear was ready to take the fight to the enemy's doorstep. The federal investigation into Rodriguez construction began quietly, triggered by Tyler's carefully documented evidence of labor violations, tax evasion, and immigration-related crimes. But what started as a routine enforcement action quickly escalated when FBI agents discovered the conspiracy to weaponize child protective services against minority families. Agent Maria Santos from the FBI's Civil Rights Division was assigned to lead the investigation into what she privately called the most sophisticated hate crime operation she'd encountered in 15 years with the Bureau. The family's first organization turned out to be far more extensive than anyone had realized, with chapters in 12 states and a documented history of targeting Native American, Hispanic, and African American families. Marcus knew none of this when Rodriguez made his final, desperate play. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late January. Marcus was at the tribal government offices, meeting with the Economic Development Committee about a possible job training program, when his phone exploded with calls. The first was from Rose, his aunt, her voice shaking with panic. "Marcus, you need to come home right now. There are police cars everywhere and they have the bobbies." His blood turned to ice. "What do you mean they have the bobbies?" Child Services came with a court order. They said there was an emergency, that the children were in immediate danger. They took Joseph and Maria and they arrested Angela. Marcus ran from the building to his truck, calling Jennifer White Hawk as he drove. She was already on her way, having heard about the emergency custody order through her contacts at the courthouse. "Marcus, listen to me carefully," Jennifer said over the phone. "Don't go to your house first. Come straight to my office. Whatever Rodriguez has done, we need to understand it before you react." The emergency custody order was a masterpiece of legal manipulation. Rodriguez had convinced a different judge, one known for being tough on child welfare cases, that new evidence had emerged showing the twins were in immediate danger. The evidence included photos of Marcus allegedly drinking while caring for the Bobbies, witness statements claiming Angela Spotted Horse was under the influence of drugs during childcare, and medical records suggesting the twins were malnourished and developmentally delayed. All of it was fabricated, but it was convincing enough to fool a judge who didn't know the background and was presented with what appeared to be an emergency situation requiring immediate action. "How is this possible?" Marcus asked, staring at the court documents. "We just went through this with DHS. Sarah Chin found no problems." "Different jurisdiction," Jennifer explained grimly. Rodriguez forum shopped until he found a judge who would listen to him. Judge Harold Winters has a reputation for erring on the side of removing children first and asking questions later. The twins had been placed in emergency foster care with a family in Lawton, coincidentally, a family that attended the same church as Linda Rodriguez and had connections to Families First. Angela Spotted Horse had been arrested on charges of child endangerment and drug possession, with methamphetamine allegedly found in her purse during the custody intervention. "They planted drugs on Angela," Marcus said flatly. She's never used anything stronger than aspirin in her life. I believe you, but proving it will take time we don't have. The emergency custody hearing is tomorrow, and if we can't demonstrate that this entire situation is fabricated, the twins could remain in foster care for months while the allegations are investigated. That night, Marcus sat in his empty house, surrounded by baby toys and equipment that would never be used again if Rodriguez succeeded. The nursery that he and Dancing Moon had painted together before her death felt like a tomb. He'd survived combat, loss, prejudice, and legal attacks, but the thought of his children growing up in strangers' homes while their real family was destroyed by lies was almost more than he could bear. Tyler arrived at midnight with news that changed everything. The FBI raided Rodriguez Construction this afternoon, he announced, setting his laptop on Marcus's kitchen table. Federal agents seized computers, financial records, and arrested 3 people including Rick Coleman, the private investigator. Marcus looked up from his coffee. What does that mean for the twins? It means Agent Santos has been building a case for 6 weeks, and she's ready to blow Rodriguez's entire operation wide open. The raid was triggered by the fake DHS complaint, but what they found goes way beyond harassment of your family. Tyler opened his laptop and showed Marcus a series of documents. Rodriguez has been running a human trafficking operation disguised as a construction company. The undocumented workers weren't just being underpaid. They were being held in company housing, charged inflated rent for squalid conditions, and threatened with violence if they tried to leave. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. Rodriguez Construction had brought workers from Mexico and Central America with promises of good jobs and legal assistance, then trapped them in a cycle of debt and fear. Workers were charged for transportation, housing, food, and tools at prices that ensured they could never pay off their debts. Those who tried to escape were threatened with deportation or worse. But here's the part that's going to save your kids, Tyler continued. The FBI found evidence that Rodriguez has been using the family's first network to target the families of workers who tried to organize or complain. When workers threatened to go to authorities, Rodriguez would have their children taken by Child Protective Services on fabricated charges. Marcus felt sick. How many families? At least 37 that they've documented so far, spread across 5 states. Native American families, Hispanic families, African American families, anyone who got in Rodriguez's way or represented the kind of people his organization wanted to remove from their communities. The emergency custody hearing the next morning was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. What should have been a simple proceeding about his twins became a federal courtroom drama involving FBI agents, civil rights violations, and a criminal conspiracy that stretched across multiple states. Agent Santos took the stand first, methodically dismantling every piece of evidence Rodriguez had presented. The photos of Marcus drinking were proven to be digitally manipulated. The witness statements came from people who'd never been to the reservation and were being paid by Rodriguez through intermediaries. The medical records were forgeries created by someone with access to the twins' real files, but lacking the expertise to make the falsifications believable. Angela Spotted Horse's arrest was revealed to be the result of planted evidence, with security footage from a gas station showing Rick Coleman placing a small package in her purse while she was paying for fuel. The methamphetamine had been purchased from an informant working with the FBI to build their case against a different drug operation. But the most damaging evidence came from Rodriguez's own communications. The FBI had recovered emails between Rodriguez, Linda Rodriguez, and other families' first members explicitly discussing their plan to neutralize the Indian who had interfered with family business. The communications revealed not just racism, but a calculated strategy to use the child welfare system as a weapon against anyone who threatened their operations. Judge Winters, faced with evidence that his courtroom had been used as part of a federal criminal conspiracy, was visibly shaken. "Mr. Running Bear," he said during a recess, "I owe you and your children a profound apology. It appears my court was manipulated by criminals who exploited my concern for child welfare to further their own agenda." The twins were returned to Marcus that afternoon, though they'd been in foster care for less than 24 hours. Joseph and Maria seemed unharmed but clingy, crying when Marcus tried to put them down even for a moment. It would take weeks for them to fully readjust to their normal routine. Rodriguez was arrested that evening at his home, charged with human trafficking, conspiracy, civil rights violations, filing false police reports, and a dozen other federal and state crimes. Linda Rodriguez and 4 other families' first members were arrested on related charges. The organization's assets were frozen, and investigations began in 11 other states where similar operations had been suspected. Rebecca called Marcus that night, her voice filled with tears of relief and anger. "I saw the news. I can't believe how far they were willing to go." It was never really about Isabella or the twins, Marcus realized. They were just convenient targets. Rodriguez has been using hatred as a business model for years. The trials took over a year, but the convictions were swift and decisive. Rodriguez received 35 years in federal prison for human trafficking and civil rights violations. Linda Rodriguez got 15 years. The private investigator Rick Coleman turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing details about dozens of other cases where families had been targeted. During the sentencing hearing, Marcus was asked to give a victim impact statement. He stood before the judge holding Joseph and Maria, now toddlers taking their first steps, and spoke not just about his own family's ordeal, but about all the families who had suffered. Your Honor, Thomas Rodriguez tried to steal my children because he couldn't tolerate the idea that a Native American man might have value as a father. He tried to destroy Rebecca Martinez because she dared to help us. He used the systems designed to protect children as weapons to terrorize families who didn't meet his definition of acceptable Americans. Marcus paused, looking directly at Rodriguez, who sat slumped at the defendant's table. But he failed, because hatred is ultimately weaker than love, and lies are ultimately weaker than truth. My children are safe. Rebecca's daughter is safe. And because of the FBI's investigation, dozens of other families will never face what we went through. In the end, Rebecca did come back to work for Marcus, at least part-time. The pediatric office job had been good, but she missed the twins and the extended family feeling of Marcus's household. Isabella, now 3, called Marcus Uncle Marcus and the twins her baby cousins. The arrangement wasn't what any of them had planned, but it worked. Marcus married Jennifer White Hawk in a traditional Comanche ceremony 2 years later, not because he needed someone to help with the twins. He'd proven he could handle that himself, but because they'd fallen in love during the long fight to protect his family. Jennifer adopted Joseph and Maria, giving them a mother who understood both the modern world and their cultural heritage. Angela Spotted Horse became the twins' honorary grandmother, teaching them traditional songs and stories during her continued visits. Rose, Marcus's aunt, lived long enough to see the children start kindergarten, where they were among the top students in their class. The family's first organization was disbanded, its leaders imprisoned, and its tactics exposed in congressional hearings that led to reforms in how Child Protective Services handled reports from anonymous sources. The Rodriguez Construction Company was sold to pay restitution to the workers who had been exploited, with the proceeds going to support immigration services and legal aid organizations. Thomas Rodriguez died in federal prison 3 years into his sentence, alone and forgotten, except by the families whose lives he'd tried to destroy. His legacy became a cautionary tale about how hatred and prejudice could corrupt even systems designed to protect the innocent. Marcus Running Bear kept the newspaper clipping about Rodriguez's death in his desk drawer, not out of spite, but as a reminder. The headline read, "Hate Crime Organizer Dies in Prison." Below it, in Marcus's handwriting, was a note. Evil men plant seeds of hatred, but good people harvest justice. The twins grew up knowing their story, how they'd been saved by the love of people who weren't related to them by blood, how strangers had become family, and how their father had fought the entire system to bring them home. They learned that family wasn't just about genetics, but about who stood with you when the world tried to tear you apart. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the Oklahoma wind carried the scent of sage across the reservation, Marcus would sit on his front porch watching his children play and remember Rebecca Martinez, the brave woman who had crossed cultural lines to save his bobbies and ended up saving them all. Dehydrated, the doctor explained as nurses worked to find a vein in the infant's tiny arm. We can keep her stable for now, but Marcus, she needs breast milk. Formula isn't an option for this baby. I'm working on it, Marcus said, though he had no idea how. Rebecca was the fourth woman he'd contacted about wet nursing. The others had either been unable to produce enough milk or had been frightened off by the reservation location. Finding another wet nurse would take time Maria didn't have. That night, while Maria slept in the hospital crib connected to an IV line, Marcus made another call. His Army buddy Tyler Redhorse worked for a private investigation firm in Tulsa and owed Marcus his life from their deployment in Afghanistan. "Running Bear, you son of a gun," Tyler's familiar voice boomed through the phone. "What's got you calling at midnight?" Marcus explained the situation, and Tyler's tone grew serious. "So these people basically stole a baby to punish the mother for helping you out. That's kidnapping with extra steps, brother. Can you find out where they took Isabella?" "Already running searches while you're talking." Thomas Rodriguez. "Oh, this is interesting. Guy's got a clean public record, but his business has been investigated twice for discriminatory hearing practices. Never charged, but there's a pattern here." The sound of typing filled the pause. "And get this, Linda Rodriguez volunteers with a group called Families First that's got ties to some pretty nasty organizations. They claim to be about child welfare, but their social media shows a different story." "What kind of different story?" "The kind where they share articles about the dangers of Native American communities and the need to protect white children from cultural corruption. Your Rebecca isn't just dealing with concerned grandparents, Marcus. She's up against people who see this as a holy war." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't just about custody or family disputes. The Rodriguez family had weaponized the legal system to separate a mother from her child because they couldn't tolerate their granddaughter being cared for by someone who dared to help a Native American family. Tyler continued typing. "They've got Isabella at Linda's sister's house in Moore. Woman named Carmen Vasquez, divorced, no kids of her own. Looks like they're setting up a temporary guardian situation while they file for permanent custody." "On what grounds?" "Endangerment, exposure to drug use, unsuitable living conditions, association with dangerous individuals." Tyler's voice was grim. They've built a whole narrative about how Rebecca is unfit because she works on the reservation. They're claiming you're involved in drug trafficking, that the tribal community is dangerous for children. All the usual stereotypes wrapped up in legal language. Marcus felt that familiar combat rage building again. What do we do? We fight dirty, brother. These people want to play games with a Comanche warrior and an Apache investigator. Let's show them what that looks like. The next morning brought unexpected help. Dr. Hawkins had reached out to her network and found another wet nurse, Angela Spotted Horse, a Kiowa woman from Anadarko who had recently lost her own infant and was dealing with oversupply. She was willing to help, but it would mean a longer drive twice daily, and the cost would be higher than Marcus could afford. Before he could figure out the logistics, Jennifer White Hawk appeared at the hospital with news. I talked to Judge Patricia Morrison. She's the one who signed the emergency custody order. She's willing to meet with us this afternoon, off the record. Apparently, she's been having second thoughts about the Rodriguez petition. What kind of second thoughts? The kind where she realizes she might have been manipulated by some very convincing liars. Judge Morrison has a reputation for fairness, but she's also known for being absolutely ruthless when she discovers someone has played games with her courtroom. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in Judge Morrison's chambers, a wood-paneled room that smelled of law books and old coffee. Judge Morrison was a slight woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Mr. Running Bear," she said without preamble, "I've been a judge for 15 years, and I pride myself on protecting children. But I've also learned that sometimes the people claiming to protect children are the ones causing the most harm." She opened a file on her desk. "I've been doing some research since signing that emergency order. The Rodriguez family painted a very particular picture of you and your community. They claimed you were involved in criminal activity, that Ms. Martinez was exposing Isabella to danger by working on the reservation." "None of that is true, Your Honor." "I'm beginning to realize that." Judge Morrison pulled out a stack of papers. "Your military record is exemplary. Your late wife was a respected teacher. You've never been arrested, never been investigated for any criminal activity. Your tribal community has lower crime rates than the surrounding county." She leaned forward. "What concerns me, Mr. Running Bear, is that I was presented with what appears to be a deliberately misleading picture designed to exploit certain prejudices. That makes me very angry." Jennifer spoke up. "Your Honor, we believe Isabella Rodriguez Martinez was removed from her mother not because of any danger, but because certain parties disapproved of Ms. Martinez working for a Native American family." Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "That would be a very serious allegation, Ms. White Hawk, it would suggest that my court was used as a weapon in what amounts to a hate crime. We believe that's exactly what happened, Your Honor, and we can prove it. Tyler's investigation had uncovered social media posts, recorded phone calls, and email exchanges that revealed the Rodriguez family's true motivations. They hadn't been concerned for Isabella's safety. They'd been outraged that their former daughter-in-law dared to work for those people, and wanted to punish her for stepping outside their definition of acceptable behavior. But even with evidence of the family's prejudice, getting Isabella back wouldn't be simple. The legal system moved slowly, and Rebecca was suffering every moment her daughter remained in strangers' hands. That's when Marcus decided to take matters into his own hands. If the Rodriguez family wanted to fight using stereotypes about dangerous Native Americans, he'd give them exactly what they expected, but not in the way they anticipated. He called Tyler back. "I need you to arrange a meeting with Thomas Rodriguez. Tell him I want to negotiate." "Marcus, that's not a good idea. These people want to believe I'm some kind of savage who can be bought off or intimidated. Let them believe it. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them underestimate you while you're positioning for the kill shot." The meeting was set for the next evening at a restaurant in Lawton, neutral ground, where Thomas Rodriguez would feel safe and superior. Marcus spent the day preparing, but not in ways Rodriguez would expect. He wasn't planning violence or intimidation. He was planning something far more devastating: the complete destruction of Thomas Rodriguez's reputation and business empire. Because Tyler's investigation had uncovered something interesting about Rodriguez's company. Those discrimination investigations had been just the tip of the iceberg. Rodriguez Construction had been using undocumented workers, paying them below minimum wage, and threatening them with deportation if they complained. The man who claimed to be protecting his granddaughter from dangerous influences was running an operation that exploited the most vulnerable people in the community. Marcus smiled grimly as he prepared for the meeting. Thomas Rodriguez was about to learn that the most dangerous thing about a Comanche warrior wasn't his capacity for violence. It was his patience, his planning, and his absolute refusal to let injustice stand. The war for Isabella was about to escalate, and the battlefield wouldn't be a courtroom or a government office. It would be the court of public opinion, where a man's true character would be exposed for all to see. Rodriguez had made the mistake of thinking he was fighting a grieving widower struggling to feed his children. He was actually fighting a combat veteran with friends in very useful places, a deep understanding of how systems could be manipulated, and nothing left to lose. Part 3. The Applebee's on Cash Road was busy for a Thursday evening, filled with families enjoying dinner and the low hum of conversation. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back where he could see the entrance and exits, old habits from his military days that served him well in civilian confrontations. Thomas Rodriguez entered at exactly 7 o'clock, scanning the restaurant until he spotted Marcus. The man was shorter than Marcus had expected, maybe 5'8", with carefully styled gray hair and an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people on the reservation made in a month. He walked with the confident swagger of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Rodriguez slid into the booth across from Marcus, his eyes immediately cataloging details. Marcus's simple jeans and button-down shirt, his long black hair pulled back in a traditional braid, the silver bracelet his grandmother had made him visible on his wrist. "So you're the Indian my daughter-in-law has been working for," Rodriguez said without preamble, his voice carrying the particular condescension reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. Marcus had dealt with men like Rodriguez before, in the army, in business, in every interaction where his heritage became a weapon someone else tried to use against him. The key was never to react to the provocation, never to give them the savage they expected to see. "I'm Marcus Running Bear," he said calmly. "Rebecca Martinez has been helping me feed my infant twins since my wife died in childbirth." "Rebecca Martinez," Rodriguez repeated, emphasizing the surname. "You mean Rebecca Rodriguez. She's still legally married to my son, despite what the papers say. And she's been exposing my granddaughter to God knows what kind of influences in your community." The waitress approached, and Rodriguez ordered coffee. Marcus asked for water. They sat in silence until she left, two men sizing each other up across a formica table. "Let's cut to the chase," Rodriguez said, leaning forward. "I know your type. You see a vulnerable woman, someone desperate for money, and you take advantage. My granddaughter doesn't belong in whatever situation you've created." Marcus almost smiled. Rodriguez was so confident in his assumptions, so certain he understood the dynamic, that he'd walked blindly into a trap. "What is it you think I want, Mr. Rodriguez?" "Money, obviously. Name your price. Rebecca stops working for you, finds a more appropriate job, and everyone wins. My granddaughter gets back to a stable home environment and you find someone more suitable to help with your situation." The coded language wasn't lost on Marcus. Someone more suitable meant someone white, someone who wouldn't contaminate Rodriguez's granddaughter with the wrong kind of influences. "And if I refuse?" Rodriguez's smile was cold. "Then Isabella stays in protective custody while we pursue permanent guardianship. Rebecca can visit her daughter supervised, maybe once a week, until she demonstrates she's ready to make better choices about her life and her associates." It was exactly what Marcus had expected: extortion, wrapped in concern for child welfare. Rodriguez was betting that a grieving Native American man would be easily intimidated by the threat of prolonged legal battles and government intervention. "I need to think about this," Marcus said finally. "My twins, they're not doing well with formula. Maria almost died yesterday from dehydration." Rodriguez's expression didn't change. "That's not my problem. Maybe you should have thought about that before getting involved in this situation." They parted ways with Rodriguez believing he'd successfully intimidated Marcus into compliance. He expected a call within 24 hours accepting his terms. Instead, he got something very different. Tyler Redhorse had been busy during the meeting, conducting what he liked to call aggressive research into Rodriguez construction. The discrimination investigations had been public record, but Tyler had connections in the Department of Labor, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Oklahoma Tax Commission that provided a much fuller picture of Rodriguez's business practices. The evidence was damning. Rodriguez Construction had been systematically exploiting undocumented workers for over 5 years, paying them in cash at rates sometimes half the minimum wage. When workers complained or threatened to report the violations, Rodriguez used their immigration status as leverage, threatening to call ICE if they didn't accept whatever terms he offered. But Tyler had found something even more interesting: financial records that suggested Rodriguez was also cheating on his taxes, failing to report the cash payments to workers, and thereby avoiding both payroll taxes and worker compensation requirements. The man who was crusading to protect his granddaughter from dangerous influences was running a criminal enterprise that exploited the most vulnerable people in the community. "This is enough to destroy him," Tyler reported to Marcus over the phone. "Federal charges, state charges, civil lawsuits from the workers he's cheated. We could end his business and probably put him in prison." "Not yet," Marcus said. "First, we give him a chance to do the right thing." The next morning, Rodriguez received a package at his office. Inside was a USB drive containing copies of payroll records, bank statements, recorded phone conversations with workers, and photographs of undocumented employees at Rodriguez construction job sites. The accompanying letter was simple: "Mr. Rodriguez, you seem concerned about protecting children from dangerous influences. I thought you should see evidence of the dangerous influences in your own operation. You have 24 hours to return Isabella Martinez to her mother and withdraw your custody petition. If Isabella is not home by tomorrow evening, this information goes to the FBI, ICE, the Department of Labor, and the Oklahoma Tax Commission simultaneously. You should also know that copies have been provided to KFOR, KOCO, and the Oklahoman newspaper. Your choice. Running bear. Rodriguez's response came in the form of an angry phone call 2 hours later. "You think you can threaten me, you savage piece of shit." Rodriguez's voice was shaking with rage. "I'll destroy you. I'll have you arrested for extortion. I'll make sure your children end up in foster care where they belong." Marcus had expected the explosion. Men like Rodriguez always revealed their true nature when their control was threatened. The racism that had been coded in careful language came pouring out in a torrent of slurs and threats. "Mr. Rodriguez," Marcus said calmly, "I'm not threatening you. I'm educating you. You used the legal system to steal a baby from her mother because you disapproved of the mother's associates. That's kidnapping with extra steps. You committed perjury in your court filings, claiming I was dangerous when you had no evidence of any criminal activity on my part. I don't have to listen to this. But most importantly, you forgot something crucial when you decided to play games with a Comanche warrior. We don't bluff. When we declare war, we fight until the enemy is completely defeated. Your move, Mr. Rodriguez." Marcus hung up and waited. Rodriguez would be calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to spin the evidence, looking for ways to discredit the information or claim it was obtained illegally. He'd discover that Tyler's investigation had been thorough and entirely legal, using only public records, voluntary witnesses, and information that Rodriguez's own employees were eager to provide once they understood they were protected. The call came at 4 o'clock that afternoon. This time, Rodriguez's voice was subdued, the arrogance replaced by something approaching fear. "What guarantees do I have that this information won't be released if I comply with your demands?" "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm not making demands. I'm offering you an opportunity to do the right thing before the consequences of your choices catch up with you. Release Isabella to her mother, withdraw your custody petition, and leave Rebecca Martinez alone. Do that, and this information stays private unless law enforcement comes asking. And if they do come asking, then I'll tell them the truth, that I discovered evidence of criminal activity while investigating why someone had falsely accused me of being dangerous to children. I won't volunteer the information, but I won't lie to federal agents either." There was a long pause. Rodriguez was calculating, trying to find an angle that would let him save face while avoiding disaster. "If I do this," he said finally, "I want assurances that Rebecca will find different employment. I don't want my granddaughter exposed to your people anymore." Marcus felt that familiar combat rage building, but his voice remained steady. "Mr. Rodriguez, you're not in a position to make demands, but I'll tell you what, if you return Isabella tonight and withdraw your petition tomorrow, I'll make sure Rebecca has the option of other employment. Whether she takes it is her choice." The truth was that Marcus had already arranged alternative employment for Rebecca. Jennifer White Hawk had connections with a pediatrician's office in Lawton that needed a receptionist, and they were willing to provide daycare for Isabella. The job paid better than the wet nursing arrangement and would be safer for both Rebecca and her daughter. Rodriguez agreed to the terms, and by 9 o'clock that evening, a tearful Rebecca was reunited with Isabella at Carmen Vasquez's house in Moore. Marcus wasn't there. This was Rebecca's moment, and he didn't want to complicate it with his presence. But Tyler was, documenting everything to ensure Rodriguez couldn't later claim he'd been coerced. The legal paperwork was withdrawn the next morning, with Rodriguez's attorney citing new information that resolved the family's concerns about the child's welfare. Judge Morrison was not amused by the sudden reversal and scheduled a hearing to review the entire case, but that was a problem for another day. Rebecca called Marcus that afternoon, her voice thick with tears. "I don't know how to thank you. Isabella's home, she's safe, and they're leaving us alone." "You don't need to thank me, Rebecca. You saved my children's lives. I just returned the favor." "But Marcus, I can't come back to work for you. I know you arranged something else for me, and I'm grateful, but I need to protect Isabella. If I go back to the reservation—" "I understand," Marcus said, though part of him was heartbroken. Not just because he'd lost Isabella's caregiver, but because he'd genuinely come to care about Rebecca and Isabella as part of his family. "You have to do what's best for your daughter." That evening, as Marcus watched Angela's spotted horse feed his twins, he reflected on the week's events. Isabella was safe, Rebecca had a new job, and the Rodriguez family had learned that their prejudice came with consequences. But the victory felt incomplete. The real battle wasn't over. Rodriguez might have retreated, but men like him didn't change their fundamental beliefs. They just became more careful about how they expressed them. And somewhere in Lawton, there were other Rebecca Martinez's facing other Thomas Rodriguez's, without a Comanche warrior and an Apache investigator to even the odds. Marcus Running Bear had won this war, but the larger fight against the system that had allowed it to happen was just beginning. 3 months after Isabella's return, Marcus thought the Rodriguez situation was behind him. His twins were thriving under Angela Spotted Horse's care, though her longer commute from Anadarko made the arrangement more expensive and logistically challenging. Rebecca had settled into her new job at Dr. Sarah Brennan's pediatric office, and Isabella was enrolled in an excellent daycare program. But Thomas Rodriguez was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. The first sign of renewed trouble came when Angela arrived for the morning feeding looking shaken. "Someone followed me here today," she told Marcus, glancing nervously out the window. A silver SUV with tinted windows. They stayed behind me from Anadarko all the way to your house. Marcus felt the familiar prickle of danger awareness from his combat days. Did you get a license plate? No, but when I turned into your driveway, they drove past slowly. The driver was taking pictures. That afternoon, Tyler called with disturbing news. Rodriguez has hired a new private investigator, and this one's not playing around. Guy named Rick Coleman, former cop with a reputation for finding dirt on anyone. He's been asking questions about you all over Lawton, interviewing your neighbors, checking with local businesses. What kind of questions? The kind designed to build a case that you're unfit to raise children. He's trying to find evidence of drug use, alcohol problems, criminal associates, anything that could be used against you. He's also been investigating Angela Spotted Horse, trying to dig up something on her. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. They're going after the twins. That's my read. Rodriguez can't touch Rebecca anymore without exposing himself to federal prosecution, but he's still pissed about losing. He's decided to hurt you directly by trying to get Joseph and Maria taken away. The strategy was diabolical in its simplicity. If Rodriguez could prove that Marcus was an unfit parent, the twins could be placed in foster care. As a concerned citizen who had previously tried to protect children from dangerous situations, Rodriguez could position himself as a potential guardian or advocate for the Bobbies. He'd get his revenge on both Marcus and Rebecca while portraying himself as a child welfare hero. That evening, Marcus called an emergency meeting with Jennifer White Hawk and David Running Bear, his paralegal cousin. They gathered at David's house in Oklahoma City to discuss strategy, knowing that Rodriguez's investigator might be watching Marcus's home. The good news is that you're not actually vulnerable, Jennifer explained, reviewing Marcus's file. Clean military record, stable employment, clean criminal background, good relationship with your tribal community. The twins are healthy, well cared for, and meeting all their developmental milestones. But, David added, that doesn't mean they can't manufacture problems. If they can create even the appearance of issues, drug paraphernalia planted on your property, allegations from unreliable witnesses, manufactured emergencies that make you look unstable, they might be able to convince a judge to issue a temporary removal order. Marcus thought about his house, isolated on the reservation with only elderly Rose for company during most days. It would be easy for someone to plant evidence or stage incidents that could be misinterpreted by authorities who were predisposed to believe negative stereotypes about Native American families. What do we do? Jennifer leaned forward. We get proactive. Document everything, your daily routine, the twins' care, all interactions with medical professionals and tribal services. Install security cameras around your house. And most importantly, we build a case that Rodriguez is engaged in a harassment campaign designed to retaliate against you for exposing his criminal activities. The security cameras were Tyler's contribution, military-grade equipment that would capture everything happening around Marcus's house. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Rebecca Martinez. She called Marcus on a Friday evening, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I need to see you tomorrow. There's something you need to know about what Rodriguez is planning." They met at a McDonald's in Cache, halfway between the reservation and Lawton, with Rebecca bringing Isabella and Marcus bringing the twins. The Bobbies had grown significantly in the months since Rebecca had cared for them, and seeing them together again brought tears to her eyes. "I miss them," she said simply, watching Joseph try to grab Maria's toy. "They're not even my children, but I miss them every day." "They miss you too," Marcus said, and meant it. Angela was excellent, but she was more businesslike in her approach. Rebecca had loved the twins with a mother's heart. "That's actually why I'm here," Rebecca said. "Rodriguez's wife Linda came to my workplace yesterday. She was pretending to be concerned about Isabella, asking if I needed help with childcare, offering to babysit." Marcus frowned. "That's unexpected." "That's what I thought. So I acted interested, like maybe I was struggling." She started talking about how hard it must be, being a single mother, how Isabella needed stable male figures in her life. Then she suggested that maybe Isabella could spend weekends with them, just to give me a break and let her spend time with her father's family. The pieces clicked into place in Marcus's mind. They want access to Isabella. More than that, Linda let slip that they've been talking to a lawyer about grandparents' rights again, but this time they're taking a different approach. Instead of claiming I'm unfit, they want to argue that Isabella needs connection to her father's culture and family. They're positioning themselves as the loving grandparents who just want to be part of their granddaughter's life. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a screenshot of a Facebook post. It was Linda Rodriguez at a family's first meeting, holding a picture of Isabella and talking about grandparents who are denied access to their grandchildren by vindictive ex-daughters-in-law.